All right, everyone, thanks for coming back and watching again. Today, I'm going to profile the top 5 again, and this time I'm dealing with tool number 2. That's going to be Metasploit, and I doubt you could find any top 5 pen testing tool list without finding Metasploit on that list. So let's jump into it and talk about it just a little bit. What is Metasploit? Well, essentially, it is an exploit framework that allows you to develop and test exploits. That was the purpose behind the creation. It was created by a person named H.D. Moore back in the day. And he created it specifically to create a framework for which people could develop, test exploits, and kind of share it with the world. It's also used as a penetration testing tool to exploit discovered vulnerabilities. So you can use it to exploit vulnerabilities that you may discover with Nessus or some other vulnerability scanner. And it even has the ability to discover some vulnerabilities as well with the auxiliary scanners that we'll talk about in just a second. Other things is it makes exploitation accessible to the masses. And what I mean by that is before Metasploit, most people that were exploiting vulnerabilities were writing code or using code and compiling it or something like that. Well, Metasploit, from my perspective, was the first tool that came out as an open source tool that was distributed to the masses, that allowed people to work with exploits, try to exploit systems, practice exploiting systems without having to touch a lick of code. All right. So I think it probably was I think it's one of the most influential tools in cybersecurity or in pen testing. It definitely made it possible for people to get into pen testing and things like that might not have been able to do that without Metasploit. So it's definitely one of those tools. So it's broken down into different parts. You have the exploits that are built into it. These are the missiles that you would attack your target with. The exploits are based on known vulnerabilities. So someone discovers a vulnerability and then an exploit is written for it, and it can be ported to Metasploit. And sometimes these vulnerabilities are discovered and put into Metasploit right away. The payloads, these are the ordnance that you can load inside your missile. So if you can imagine a missile, you can have a missile that lets out gas, you can have a missile that explodes, you can have a missile that lets out fire or let out water or whatever you want. Well, payloads are the equivalent to that for Metasploit. So you have your exploits that are the missiles that you're shooting, and then your payloads are the things that you put inside your missile depending on what you want to happen to the target once you hit it. All right. So the payloads are interchangeable. You can have one payload and use it with, dang near every exploit that's inside Metasploit. The payloads can range from very basic to like your basic command shell, and they can be very useful like the VNC session payloads. You can literally inject the VNC session into memory on that victim and connect to that VNC session as if there were a VNC server there. And for those of you that don't know what VNC is, just think of it as what us old people used to use for remote desktop before there was a Windows RDP. Okay. Moving on, there are auxiliary modules. These are modules that allow you to do things like crack passwords and scan. So that's what the auxiliary modules are. So let's go and jump right into the tool. All right, so let's go ahead and start Metasploit up. And there's just a couple of things, just kind of demonstrating the tool. This is not an in-depth Metasploit training or anything like that. It's just to show you some of the reasons I have the tool in my top 5. And I've kind of described those in the little presentation there at the beginning, but I want to show you a couple of things about it as well. So one thing as it loads up here is a lot of the tools that we use, and one of my top 5, we'll cover it maybe next week, will be nmap. Well, I can call nmap right from my Metasploit console and actually not have to go out and get another terminal. So as I scan this target over here, I can pull that right from within Metasploit. I don't have to go out to another terminal to run nmap. I can run it right from my prompt. And I show this because I find that a lot of the students that I've taught over years didn't know that. They didn't know that you could call it from right there. But as we see there, we can see that we can scan the target. I'm going to focus on this old exploit here because I like to use it for demonstration purposes. So let's look at that port 8081, see that it's open. We'll now do a version scan with nmap to see what's on that port. And it'll come back and tell us that you can see there. it's running this HTTP file server. Now, what I can do is I can go out and look on the internet, and we will see that that HTTP file server is basically, this comes from this company called Rigetto. So if I did a search here, I could do, literally going to paste exactly what came out of the nmap scan here. So let's just copy and paste that. Now, if you've watched, a couple of my other videos, you've seen this part, but I just want to show you how it actually works for those of you that haven't. So I'm just going to look for vulnerabilities for that specific version of that service. And you can see it's all related to some product called Rigetto, right? So now, just armed with that knowledge, okay, I'm just going to go right down into Metasploit. Again, I'm going to search for Rigetto. And this is one of the things that when I say it made it to where people that aren't coders or not developers can actually do exploitation, this is kind of what I mean. So just using that term, I can search to see if this install of Metasploit has any vulnerabilities or exploits related to that. And you can see it does right there. So now I'm going to go ahead and load that exploit. And then, I kind of mentioned to you payload. So now I'm going to pick my missile, and we'll just go with a straight shell there. And set my R host. Now I'm going to get out of this in a second and show you something here. $137. All right. So that's it. We set it. Now we launch our exploit, and we will get a shell on that victim. Assuming it, and there we go. We got our command shell. It came back. Now we can run ipconfig. We could run, run net user to like list users or whatever we wanted to do at that point. But let me get out of the exploit, and I want to show you something. And this is one of the things that, again, something that I thought everybody knew about, but as I teach, I find out more people don't know about this. So within Metasploit, you can enter a command called spool right when you get loaded in before you load your exploit. And I'm going to say spool and write it to a file named temp exploit commands, or something like that, right? So what that's doing is it's actually writing all of your commands that you enter and the results of those commands. In other words, what echoes back to you. It's writing that to that file. And this is great for teaching yourself how to use this tool, because now everything that you type will come back. So let's quickly go back in and load the exploit again. Let's set the L host again. Let's go ahead and set the R host. And let's set the payload. And the R port, and I'll just type that. It's faster than going back up. So now that I've done all that, I'm going to go ahead and do the exploit again. All right, we get our shell. So now in that shell, I'm going to just do everything we did before. I'm going to do the net user command, and I'll do ipconfig. All right, so all of these things would be screenshots that you might take to put in as part of your pen test report. Well, let me show you why spool is nice. So I'm going to get out of the exploit again. All right, I'm going to go back, and then I'm going to stop the spool, and I just do that by saying spool stop. Okay, now I can get out of Metasploit. Guess what we got? If I go look in the temp directory now, you'll see that there's that exploit commands that we created. Let me show you what's in that bad boy. If we read that file, what it did for us is it literally got a complete echo of everything we sent. So you can see where we sent the exploit command and where we set all of our stuff like our L host, R host. You can see where I set all the exploits up. So if you forget this stuff as you're learning, you can write it to a spool file and you can go back and see it, and notice it not only shows the commands that you entered, but it shows what came back. We can see our command shell came back. We can see where we did the net user and see what the results of that net user command was. So you can see literally everything. And this spool feature is one of the things that I think makes Metasploit very, very cool from a learning and a developing your skill standpoint. All right. So hopefully you enjoyed this. You can see why Metasploit is one of my top fives. And I look forward to showing you the next one next week. And I think it'll probably be nmap. So thanks for watching. Hope you come back again.